Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition. We turned out to poem 788, Joy to Have Merited the Pain. Emily will use the word merited once and only once in all of her poetry, and it will be here. Now, I think that in many ways, Emily is dancing with a biblical passage that is problematic for Emily, and yet I think so powerful for her. In the book of James, the first chapter, the second and the third verse, famous. And of course, Emily, I think in many of her pain poems, as we sometimes have called them, I think this verse is hiding there. My brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into divers temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. Now, in many ways, with this poem, we are back to poem 172, 'Tis so much joy, 'tis so much joy. She will use the word joy in 44 of her poems, which is fascinating because, as we said in an earlier conversation about happiness, she'll only use that a brief number of times, under 5. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at LearnStrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've worked through our set of introductory comments as well as the preceding 787 poems. We just finished with 787, such as The Force of Happiness, as we commented just a second ago. Now, many scholars have gone back to poem 625 as the place to start for this one. 'Twas a long party, but the time for interview had come before the judgment seat of God. The last and second time these fleshless lovers met. A heaven in a gaze, a heaven of heavens, the privilege of one another's eyes. No lifetime on them apparelled as the new unborn, except they had beheld born infiniter. Now was bridal air like this, a paradise, the host, and cherubim and seraphim, the unobtrusive guest. Now, many have considered this, among them the scholar Priest, David Priest, that this is another master poem. His explication of this poem, I think, is so remarkable and unique, useful. I'm just going to go ahead and read it. Priest says, quote, "In this poem, Emily seems to imagine the joy of being united with her beloved master in heaven. Her master has died first. She says, for me, it was nothing but joy to have been awarded the pain of my last illness and the release from it in death, and to have perished separated from you every step on the road to paradise." Lines 1 through 4. "Forgive me for looking upon your heavenly face with my old-fashioned, that is to say, earthly eyes. In fact, they're better for doing that than any new eyes bought in paradise could be, because on earth I saw you with them, and it was upon them that you gazed, and now in heaven these earthly eyes are my hazel witness that it is really you, for they tell me that your features are the same." Lines 4 through 12. "You were with me on earth so fleetingly, like the dawn summoned back into keeping by the morning, and our separation has been so infinite." Lines 13 through 16. "I remember that our love was as high as the hills, and that its depth was marked on my soul like a flood mark on white wagon wheels." Lines 17 through 20. "Our love haunted my memory until my last decade ended, and now that it has become actualized, after all the haunting, it should last at least for eternity." Lines 21 through 24. Now, I think having that as our background can help us to read this poem. It is a remarkable theodicy that we've commented in our discussion of our Big Five, the last of the Big Five, theodicy. Why must there be pain? Why must there be suffering? Why must there be separation? And again, Emily's argument in answer to the theodictic question is often no longer ask, why did this happen to me, but rather for me. That is to say, pain is a propedeutic, instructional, didactic. She says it this way: "Joy to have merited the pain, to merit the release. Joy to have perished every step, to compass paradise. Pardon, to look upon thy face with these old-fashioned eyes, better than new could be for that, though bought in paradise. Because they looked on thee before, and thou hast looked on them. Prove me, my hazel witnesses, the features are the same. So fleet thou wert when present, so infinite when gone, an Orient's apparition remanded of the morn. The height I recollect 'twas even with the hills. The depth upon my soul was notched as floods on whites of wheels. To haunt till time have dropped at his last decade away, and haunting actualize to last at least eternity. The repetition of sounds is quite remarkable. Notice the last and least. We'll see whites and wheels. Pay attention to the games of sound that she's playing with. She begins, of course, with the word joy. And again, 44 times in her poetry, she uses this word. She says joy, to have merited the pain. Again, the use of pain in 52 of her poems, she, notice, capitalizes it. In other words, for Emily, the question isn't, is there pain and suffering in the theodicy question? The question for Emily is, what is its value? What is its merit? She says, no, it was more than enough to merit the release. Notice the dash. Then joy to have perished every step to compass paradise. Now, of course, you see the word paradise, you can't help but think of Milton and Paradise Lost. And obviously the ending of that classic text, we've given full lectures on all of that at learnstrong.net. As the two lovers, Adam and Eve, leave Eden, leave paradise hand in hand. Then she goes to pardon. Pardon to look upon thy face. Notice the language here, the legal language of merited and pardon. To look upon thy face. Now again, the obvious question is, who is the thy? Again, Priest calls it another master poem. Somebody that she clearly has great affection for and hopes that he or she has great affection for her. With these, notice she calls them old-fashioned eyes. You'll remember this old-fashioned construction a couple of times in her poetry. Better than new could be, for that though bought in paradise. In other words, the eyes, she says, that I have gained here, even more profound, because they looked on thee before. In other words, even before you died, my eyes were always looking on and towards you. And thou hast looked on them. In other words, it's reciprocal. And then she'll use this phrase, prove me, which we saw in 97 and 966. The only other time she uses this, prove me. And all of a sudden you begin to go, wait a minute. We've got merit. We've got pardon. We've got proof. And we've got lots of legal language going on here. Not bad for, of course, a young lady raised by a father and a brother, both lawyers. Prove me, then she'll call it, my hazel witnesses, the color of her eyes. The features are the same. In other words, nothing's changed. In other words, what she's saying here is, even though you're gone, I haven't changed. My affection, my love for you hasn't changed at all. And now she's back to him. So fleet thou wert. Hear all the F sounds, by the way. So fleet thou wert when present. So infinite when gone. In other words, she can't forget about him. An orient's apparition remanded of the morn. The use of the word orient here, she's done this a few times in her poetry. In other words, she wants to point out how unique he was. The height, she says, notice capitalized height, I recollect was even with the hills. We've seen, of course, this referencing to the poem Hills right outside of her window. The hills, in other words, I lift my eyes to the mountains. Of course, the Psalms come to mind immediately. The depth, notice we go from height to depth. Upon my soul was notched. You'll remember this word notched from 360. It's the other time that she uses it. By the way, the use of the word soul always comes back. We want to point it out always. In 67 of her poems, 141 times in her poetry, she uses the word soul. And then, of course, the simile, as floods on whites of wheels, right? The referencing here could be a wagon wheel. The referencing here could also be a steamboat wheel that's moving through the water. In other words, the circle, if you will, of life and then death. And then she'll use the word haunt twice here. To haunt, till time, notice capitalized, have dropped his last decade away, and haunting, actualize. I think actualize is the key word of the poem, because that's, in fact, the argument that she's making. All of the pain has actualized me. I am ready. I'm prepared to last at least eternity. In other words, to be with you for eternity is going to be the greatest of gifts. And I think that's the point at 2a, that pain is a propedeutic, that in fact being reunited with a lover or a pal is enough. I mean, she says, I can get through any pain as long as I can get to be with you. At 2b, I love the word choice. Again, the legal language, as we pointed out, starting with merit and, of course, pardon and the like. At 3a, well, how are we going to relate this to other texts? Obviously, all the other master poems, Farr, the great scholar, has suggested that there's 132 of these poems that are written for somebody who she respects profoundly. Obviously, 625. Go back and look at that study again that we did and measure it with this. I think it works. I also would like to think of Tennyson's In Memoriam, right? "'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all," he says in that classic set of lines. We've given lectures at learnstrong.net on Tennyson's In Memoriam. He lost his best pal, and he's trying to come to terms with it, and one of the ways he does that is through the poetry. I think Emily does something quite similar in a poem like this. Finally, at 3b, in your own life, who would you like to be reunited with in the afterlife, after death? Do you have somebody like that? Thank you.